if I give you 90 seconds right now on spot, what would you like to talk about?
One of the things will stay with me, the concept and the implication.
The technology of AI that is able to do the expected.
Yeah, and it changes things.
Of where we are in the zipper test. Are we opening something or are we closing something?
So when we talk about building across borders, having a space wherein art speaks, ideas move, and to make that a reality today, we are joined by the most amazing Professor Tim Gilman-Szefczyk. He has been a professor at NYU, but more than that, he has been a visual artist and has been a creative director for more than 2 decades, has been spanning his work across art at the Reti Center, the Gulliver gate miniature that you see at the Times Square. He has been into the creative direction space, leading how institutions look at it, and about his upcoming project, The Art Thinking, and explaining how we navigate this space when you have AI, when you have so much of technology around. So it's such a pleasure to have you with us today in this conversation and speak about art.
Thank you so much, Yukta. It's great to be here.
And I would love to understand, over the years that you have been working with art and the visual direction space, and there's a painting right back at you as well, which I really admire. So, how did it come along together? Like, how did you bring these mixed pieces, specifically when you have had a cultural environment around you so much?
Yeah. So I studied literature, really, and when I got out of college, I realized that maybe I should have studied visual art, that I was actually more drawn to that as a form of expression, that I wanted to keep it free of any kind of obligation to make a living with it. And so I decided that I would use the work that I'd done with language and literature as my means of making a living. So I worked as an English teacher, as a journalist, as a translator, as a creative director in an advertising agency, specifically doing copywriting. I helped start a radio program for National Public Radio, like all these things that were sort of like work around the use of language as a means of, transacting within the world of commerce. Then I went back and got my PhD, and it was in an applied philosophy capacity. So I read and studied philosophy, but then thought about how it was that I could take what I was learning there and apply it to the work that I was doing overall. And what it allowed me to do was to take my visual arts practice that had been running in parallel with all of my my money earning work, which was, as I said, was through words, and bring the two of them together. So I had been making art, curating and writing art criticism for over 20 years with my wife as a duo. So Franciszka is her name. Franciszka plus Tim Gilman was the name that we were using. And we worked in museums and galleries and plus a lot of art residencies across Europe and in our home base in New York. And so when I got my PhD and I was able to actually leave my advertising job, which was my full-time job, and to start to do a social art practice as my employment. And the first one that I did was the thing you briefly mentioned, which is called Gulliver's Gate. And that was a museum of the world in miniature that opened in Times Square. It was a really amazing project because we commission miniature versions of the world from all over the world, where the people on the continents that they were representing in miniature were actually the ones making the models themselves, making a lot of the creative decisions in tandem with us, and then everything was brought together and assembled in Times Square. And it opened to tremendous success that we were sort of promoted all over the world. But then really from a perspective of, I would call ethical and strategic differences between myself and the other founders of the venture, that I left. Right. And it was an amazing process to develop it. And then running it as a business was something that I couldn't do the way that they were doing it. And we had sort of irreconcilable differences. And it actually ended up closing shortly after, but it is going to, I've just been told that it is going to reopen under a different name and
Yeah.
in another New York City location. And so I wish them well, but it really, for me, the process of developing it as a business, as a creative expression, was the beginning of a new art form for myself, which I've called institutional sculpture. And that's the idea that our existing institutions of whatever kind have to change and have to be in new and different innovative forms that are going to allow us to deal with all of these, call them wicked problems that we're dealing with in society, which primarily revolve around the environment and technology. And so I, was able to think about that and write about that within an academic context while working on it in a very practical commercial context with Gulliver's Gate. When I finished with Gulliver's Gate, I then ended up getting involved with a nonprofit called the Reti Center that was based in Red Hook, Brooklyn, which is where I was living, and it was created in response to Superstorm Sandy, which had really devastated the neighborhood, and to me demonstrated how closely related environmental catastrophe and climate change were to social injustice and the vulnerability of people at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And so the organization was, really, it was really driven by the founder. But it was an all volunteer organization. They did just one event a year for the first 2 years. And then I got on board, and together we pushed the organization over the course of about 7 years till it grew to a multi-million-dollar nonprofit that is
No.
working on two fronts: energy and water, and operating out of Red Hook, but really applying our program and our philosophy across all of New York City. And that was to improve the quality of water in New York Harbor through demonstration projects, and also to work with the local community to bring them towards the water and down to the water, even though the water was the biggest threat. As demonstrated by Superstorm Sandy, sea levels are rising, extreme weather is coming, but instead of running away from the water, we can go towards it and we can learn to adapt our cities and our environment and our mindset that, we have this problem. We can't turn our backs to it. We need to turn towards it and face it and look at it with a lens of climate optimism instead of just climate catastrophe and climate disaster. And that worked very well in alignment with our energy program, which was large scale solar installations to bring more stable power to neighborhoods and areas that are more fragile in terms of their infrastructure, and to have the power be centrally generated, clean, and available and benefiting the local populations. So there have been several of those projects that have come to fruition out of that. And it was also that we were actually training people from the community to be the installers and even partially the owners of those solar systems. So Ready was an idea that had really the opportunity to grow through this idea of through this project of institutional sculpture into very much of a kind of example of what a nonprofit can be in relation to what we would call climate optimism or community-based environmental engagement. So that's a lot of stuff all at
And
once, and we can obviously pick things apart.
yeah, I think absolutely, and
Excuse
because
me.
we've touched on multiple directions as well.
Yes.
So it's not just about like one area we're talking about how climate, how environment has been a part of it. On the other side of it, it has so much been around the cultural aspect as well, because you have been tried to integrate a lot of different architectures that you have seen around and into navigating that into a certain concept, and that's how the miniature concept was born and put in place. And of course, now it will be launched into some different place. But that's the entire concept of, I'd say, expressionism as well, wherein we look at things in a big, way, or like the vision, and then how we make it or represent it in a way that it looks different, or in a way more executable. So if someone
Yeah.
looks at it, they see that vision come to
Yeah.
reality. And to understand that, I mean, how do you like, of course, you talk about Times Square, you talk about New York. It's the space or the place wherein all the artists thrive, and randomly walking through the streets of Brooklyn or Times Square, you just pick an idea and it changes things. So when we try to understand art from that perspective, or the ideas you talked about, how we've utilized different models to fight climate change, or work around the environmental models as well. So how do you navigate that space? I mean, how do you think art becomes a medium to express or talk about the most important
Yeah.
things that you feel people miss out, but then it becomes a medium to express in terms of models, or like pictures or sculptures, could be anything. But then how do you navigate through that space where an art becomes the medium for that, the expressionism of these complex thoughts?
Well, I think very important is to look at not the role of the individual. And a lot of times in the history of art, it's been very based on, one particular person, and trying to like call out like the sort of genius artist, and to recognize that nobody is operating individually. That if you didn't have Vincent van Gogh's brother Theo advancing his career, supporting him, and everything, there would be no Vincent van Gogh. And so one of the
Yeah.
things that I've been working on now is it's an art thinking network. It's called Improbable. It was invented by a team in Paris. And one of the things that they talk about when they're trying to introduce people to this idea, which is really an operationalizing of art thinking for people who are not artists, who do not want to be artists, who do not expect to be artists, could be, of course, but are not. And that's called a Scenius. The concept is the Scenius, and that is the scene for genius, or the location where things happen. And that recognizes that it is not a person, an individual, that it is a whole constellation of people, place, opportunity, possibility, from which good, new, potent, fertile ideas arise. And so if we can recognize, cultivate, and join into the energy of the Scenius, the scene with the genius, the things that come together, it's not an individual effort. It's not an individual mind. It's the sort of common ground. It's the collective where people recognize one another, as having shared interests. And this is not to say that it's like a sect or a cult, because it's not driven by a single goal or a single opinion, or something that is limiting or exclusive, but it's an opening, and within that opening, many people can bring their energy, their ideas, their practices, and work together to grow something larger than themselves. And I think that when you put a label of art on it, it often is something that feels that it is excluding those who would not think of themselves or would feel intimidated by the term of anything labeled as art. And I think that the way to think about it really is that it's about um, sharing and communicating and hoping for a kind of creative productivity that is open to anybody who wants to participate in it, and that even if you just come in for a minute and then go out, you can actually take something with you, whether it's inspiration or a new connection with somebody, or a lesson that you learn from doing one thing together, or you actually end up committing to it for a very long time. And so I think that idea that, everywhere we go, like you said in New York, it's like you're walking around in New York and you can just feel energy coming out of things and people. And there's something that attracts us to cities and attracts us to high density areas. And that is this human activity that is productive, and can be productive without being extractive, can be productive without being destructive. And I think that if we're able to look for and find those things and to become part of those things, or if you are part of those things, to invite people in for, more multiple voices, as opposed to something that's like, dictating a particular view or a particular direction. Then I think that's how one would think about the openness of thinking, that could be called art thinking, or could be called, I don't know, like a collective benefit or a social benefit or social impact, which is the sort of things that I'm, always trying to find a way into, with different things that I'm doing. Yeah.
I love how beautifully you've explained this concept as well, because so many of us, like if you put someone through a museum or any experience, a lot of people would think art as a specific industry, or you need to be that creative to understand it, but very few would actually be in that space wherein they would understand that how was this working, or take it more creatively, instead of I don't think I have an artistic mind to adopt different things, or art to put it in perspective, art thinking. So how do you cultivate art thinking, even for people like you work at NYU, and we have like the business hubs out there, and NYU Stern is there. So when we talk about these businessy landscapes as well, wherein it's difficult to explain someone, how our thinking works, like it's because if we are thinking so transactionally, that revenue in sorry, like money in, revenue out, and it's very ROI based thought process. So how do we cultivate that sense of creative thinking, and how can this creative thinking then benefit long term, in terms of I'd say growth, or the cultivating the right artistic mindset, as you talked about in art
hmm
thinking.
So I was really excited last summer to meet the founders of this art thinking network, and they have systematically gone through what they see as the roots of artistic creation and creativity in visual art in the sort of latter half of the 20th century, and are bringing it in as a workshop and practice, really, really focused on drawing that out of anyone who participates. And so it's, as art moved away from craft and from studio practice and into more conceptual work, which was sort of like the journey of art throughout the 20th century, um, there were more and more efforts to invite people in, and to invite, to sort of lower the barriers that were there, tremendously cemented throughout history, of how difficult it
Right.
was to feel a part of this, or to find your way into it. And so what, a series of artists did, through the, sort of last part of the 20th century, is what they're trying to do now. And that was for people to enter art. Now what they're trying to do is like to take that idea and to take it out of art and into the rest of the world through um, very clear ideas and very clear practices that are backed in history and in practice within the work that artists have done as, modern and contemporary art. And so they have taken what would be seen as being sort of very mysterious or very inscrutable, and tried to break it down into like very focused and granular steps. And so what they do, and it's kind of amazing. I've now been a part of it several times, and I would have been very skeptical before, is they basically take a group of people, and over the course of a 3-day workshop, they take them through an understanding of what is conceptual art, why anybody would have done it, how it sort of differentiated itself from traditional art practices, which were, learned over, decades and many years of cultivating a particular skill and talent, and saying, no, there's an expression of how people think and how people communicate that can be isolated within art practice and can be then shared and learned by anybody for them to take it into their own practice. So essentially, for 3 days, anybody who joins this program is an artist. And in 3 days, they have to produce an artwork as a group, as a team, and put it on display as if they were, an artist working with a museum or working with a gallery and creating an exhibition. So it is all sped up tremendously. And you are put through a very uncomfortable process of making a lot of decisions, working very closely with a team of people you may never have met before, doing something that is totally unfamiliar to you. And in many ways, it's like starting a business or being an entrepreneur. It's like you have things thrown at you day to day that you are not expecting, that you are not prepared for, that you don't feel qualified for. And you have to sort of fall back on faith in yourself, faith in the others working with you. And it's this leap of faith. It's like, I have no way of planning. I have no roadmap that I can expect exactly what's going to come. But by putting them into this, we call it, I hate this term, but it's a safe space. So we say it's a safe space for doing this in order to show and demonstrate to yourself that you can do this yourself. It doesn't need to be in the context of art. It can be in the context of your business. It can be in the context of essentially your education or whatever it is that you're trying to develop, that you can be bold, creative, team-oriented, non-egotistical, and constructive, and very quickly work to something that was literally incomprehensible to you before as a solution. And that's an amazing process. And they have, over the course of many years, the founders of this organization were able to crystallize it into very particular steps. And I have now seen it work again and again and again. And it's so instructive for people. And it works. It's been carried out within a lot of education settings. So business schools are actually the most common place where it plays out, but it's also been done for design schools, for art schools. But then it's been taken into corporations. It's been taken into the police force. It's been taken into,
Right.
like all different kinds of applications where people can benefit from thinking laterally, from working as a team, from confronting, very different expectations and outcomes. And it really is, they call it the improbable workshop, because by thinking improbably, by thinking through something that is unexpected, uncomfortable, unfamiliar, you are more ready to deal with things that you might otherwise have seen as a barrier. And so it's really
Right.
about understanding things through a new frame that breaks open possibilities. And so it really, in the end, it
And
doesn't have to have anything to do with art. What it has to do with is kind of freeing yourself from what you have perceived to be your own boundaries. And
I
yeah,
mean,
go ahead.
as we talk about, like the concept of boundaries, and I've taken a lot of classes where we were introduced to abstract art. We talked about impressionism. We talked about how different topics, like when you're expressing yourself, how does that work? We did one activity once, I remember. So we were asked to take 3 or 4 tools, like a leaf, a brush, a toothbrush, like 4 or 5 tools, and just paint. Try to make something, like take these 3 colors and try to make something, and make different tools, like an earbud. You can like make those dots, and you just take it up. It looks pretty. I mean, even if it's does not have any meaning, but it just looks pretty now, because you have had their own blocks of different
Hmm.
tools. Now suddenly you've been told to tear it apart, and I'm like, what? So, like some people did, a lot of people like struggle, how do you tear that into pieces, something that you just made right now? And once you tore it down, you just now make a collage out of it. So you've been given a separate sheet of paper, and you place those pieces onto that paper, and it becomes something that's all new.
Hmm.
And that is an, I mean, do I have an art background, or do I love painting? Yes, but was I introduced to a concept like that? But the main objective of us going through that entire practice was to learn the concept of detachment. Sometimes we feel so attached to different things, we don't realize that if we recreate something new, it might be more beautiful than what initially we saw or what it could have been. and detachment brings more beauty, and we have had all those negative associations with detachment. So that as a concept which this activity was brought really beautifully, and what we created was very abstract. Now you need to like find meaning, unless you yourself would have thoughts with some, like you had some meaning behind it. So this, I'm just sharing this
Yeah.
activity as an example of what, how it helped me understand a very philosophical concept in life. And since you mentioned you've done your PhD also in philosophy, and
Mhm.
that's how. So, how do you think is this space more like art as a space or visual creation when you want to convey your emotions through art? Like, if I look at it, I should feel the same things that you did while creating it. How long does that process take for someone? I mean, all these activities are great when we do it and we get used to it. But when it is the time for us to build that focus, that, okay, this is something that you should aim to get out of this piece, or this is what the artist actually wanted to convey to you. So that entire process mapping from art to viewer, or from an artist to the consumer end, how does that look like?
Well, I mean, I actually want to take your question in a different direction and say you did this whole exercise with color and paint and all these things, which are, it's very foundational, fundamental human activity of mark making. But instead of
Right.
teaching you about mark making, the lesson was with detachment, right? The lesson was
Correct.
with the ability to sacrifice something that you might have felt was precious because you get something more out of it, right? And so then there's a kind of dematerialization. You're not grasping onto one material thing that you happen to do. You're actually turning it into a lesson, which is a thought rather than a material object of a painting. You don't have that anymore, but you have this new thought, and this new thought is actually of greater utility and greater benefit to you than this object that you would have otherwise kept, right? That you felt was precious. So, with writing, there's this terrible hackneyed cliche, but we say it and it works, is kill your darlings. Take this thing that you're so in love with and so holding on to and just put it aside, because it can actually stop you from doing what you want to do or doing what you need to do. And so I think that anytime that you're going to be working with art as your means of getting to something, I think that the idea is, of what use is it to you? What is it going to do in terms of changing what you're thinking or how you're working? And that, it doesn't need to be an aspiration to be making art or to feel like you're, you know, um, going to leave some permanent mark on things. Instead, it's that you're
Right.
breaking yourself out of practices that you have, inclinations that you have, in order to do something that, again, frees you from self-imposed restrictions, frees you from expected um, knee-jerk responses. And I think that that's, um, what I don't want to say that. I mean, it can kind of cross into the Eastern philosophy ideas of looking at the world with very unjaded eyes, kind of like in reinventing yourself or discovering. They call in Zen Buddhism is the beginner's mind. This idea of like, I don't have to know how to do things; I do things, and by doing things, I'm breaking myself out of what my thought is of my own limitations. And I think that if that's something that we can take into anything that we're doing, like you can now
Right.
take this detachment. You were told a detachment story, not a story, but an actual activity, right? So then this activity, this action for you is something that you've now developed, and you can then use it in any time, right? So you're going into a presentation of a new idea for your job, and you need to present this great plan, and you've like worked really hard on doing it, and you're really pleased with it, and then you're suddenly confronted in the middle of the meeting that this is just not going to work, right? They're not happy with it. The client really irritated. You haven't got it right, but because you have embraced detachment, You can be like, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. What if we tear this up into little pieces and set it down on the table instead and talk about what's here, as opposed to what it is that you saw that I was working on and presenting? I'm actually able to show you that this is made up of parts, and some of these parts may actually be more useful for this situation, that you're
Right.
changing the expectation of what it is that you want, and I'm able to change with you this expectation of what I'm able to provide. So to take it from a very concrete lesson to a very open application is, I think,
Right.
the versatility or the flexibility, the improvisational, spontaneous um, practices that are against what we would think of as purely rational, purely logical thinking. And this art thinking, improbable thinking, creative thinking that is actually what saves us from getting stuck, saves us from hitting a wall. And I think that right now we're seeing the rise of a technology of AI that is able to do the expected extraordinarily well, better than us. It's drawing on all of human history to tell us how exactly to do things that have been done a million times before, that have been done really well by brilliant, genius people. That's what AI can do for us, is it can tell us how to do things the way that they have been done. It draws on all
Correct.
of human knowledge, all of human experience that we've made available to it to tell us how to do things. It's an incredible formula. But the formula is not what has made new things. The formula is what has made stability, or what has made systems, what has made expected arguments. And we have to now, because we have this tool, um, realize that the things that we used to do are going to change, and the things that we can do are going to be discovered by us. Those things are not going to be discovered by AI. What is the relevance of a human is not something that AI is going to worry about or is going to think about. That is the human problem. That is the thing that we now are thinking about. And the emerging philosophy behind this art thinking movement, that I've been super happy to become a part of, is that we can identify, focus, and work on these things that are what differentiate us from machine thinking, from the systematic gathering, analyzing, and reducing probabilities down to a path. And that's what AI does, right? It takes infinite possibilities and it isolates them down to a particular direction that is the most probable, right? That's what it does. Predictive, like large language models, they predict the next most probable answer. Improbable thinking does the exact opposite. Instead of going to the most probable answer, it tries to go to the most improbable answer, which is not something that we would want AI to do or that AI is actually able to do, right? And that's where we can now isolate the difference between human thinking and machine thinking. And now that we have the machines that think, it's an incredibly important thing for us to do, is to figure out what are those things and how does machine thinking serve and function in one capacity, and how does human thinking serve and function in a different capacity, because those two things have to work together, otherwise we've made ourselves irrelevant, right? If we're going to do the next most expected thing, we're going to be bested by the computer every time. So the computer can't do what we can
And
do, but we don't even know what it is that we can do, that we should be doing, so that the computer can do what it does well and we can do what we do well. So we're trying to understand that, and especially in the context of education, because we as professors, as thinkers, as teachers, have to figure out how is it that we can show these people who come to us and ask us to learn, how are we going to teach them? Because we can't teach them by telling them, oh, yes, this is the answer that has always worked. This is the answer that has always been applicable. Because the machine will do that better than they will ever now, because it's drawing on everything that we've done. So what we have to teach them is, this is one tool, but there are many other tools that are different, that are unique, that you can draw on and you can cultivate. But we don't even really know what they are ourselves yet, because it's all so new and it's all happening so fast. So it's saying, let's think together and let's see how that evolves into our new situation that's emerging right in front of us. Because what's emerging right in front of us is extremely unexpected. It's extremely improbable. It's been coming, it's been, accumulating. And as I said, it comes back to technology and the environment and human interaction, which is tending towards inequality and injustice, and how do we make all of those things change in a way that will actually be a possibility for us to flourish as opposed to decline. And we're looking at a real point of change right now. Global politics are an indicator of this enormous revolution that we're going into right now, and it's an
Yeah.
environmental, a technological, and a social nexus point. And so,
Also, I think revolution as well, because it at the intersection of it, it's changing so dynamically that we also need to be at pace or be at par with those changes. And as you mentioned, that now there will be two segments. One would be now how humans think and the things that humans actually realize they are good at, and the second segregation when we are talking about what technology is capable of.
mhm.
And we also understand that the pace at which technology can advance or the things now it can accomplish, where it could be supercomputers, AI, that is not something we can match in terms of efficiency. Like the speed, I would say, like you have now quantum out there as well, but there are different things which we can focus on, and that differentiation is something that this entire movement and the improbable thinking space also creates, which also, like, to my curiosity brings us to a segment that we do. It's called 90 seconds to teach me something.
Mhm.
So since we've
Oh
been
no.
having this in-depth conversation
Yeah.
about this part, if I give you 90 seconds right now on spot, what would you like to talk about?
Oh, I knew you were going to do this, and I'd completely forgotten about it. And I said, I want to make sure that I don't stumble over this. So right now, I'm trying to buy myself some time to tell you, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to teach you how to open and close a zipper. Okay. So I have a zipper. So
Okay.
I'm demonstrating a physical model. Okay. So this physical model, we're going to be able to push it in such a way that it creates closure. And we're going to be able to pull it in such a way that it creates an opening. Okay. So I think
Okay.
that if you think about anything that's in front of you and you think that there are two different ways that you can go with it, one is going to create closure and the other is going to create an opening. So now I want you to demonstrate back to me this idea of how you do things to either create an opening or to create a closure. So I've just taught you how to do it in 9 seconds. Now it's your turn.
So do I demonstrate this with an idea, or like with
There's
something? Like, do
no
I need
there's no
to add
instructions.
something to
There's
it?
no book of instructions here. You've been presented with a very
Okay.
open, totally unapplied model. Go one direction, you open. You go another direction, you close.
Okay. So I'm just looking at. I do have something with me.
Okay.
So there's a concept that I've learned with explaining. So it's about communication.
Hmm.
So when we open a communication about a difficult topic, so
Yes.
this is how we open it,
Yes.
and we expect to have different thoughts come out of it, and we do not know what comes after it, and it becomes scattered. But the best way of, like the way a zipper is designed,
Hmm.
is because everything is interwoven with each other. So, and that's the powerful thought of open communication as well, that when you start closing it, you see towards the end how much you've opened and how much thoughts and how much topics have been out. And then since it's so beautifully designed, you when you start closing it one by one, you see that everything that opened has closed properly
Hmm.
and in an organized manner, and that's how we close communication, so that none of it is left out and it is once again a way back to how it was.
Okay. Good. So now we have the zipper test. We've just invented the zipper
Yeah.
test. And the zipper test is valuing both the opening and the closing. And it's questioning, are we able to be aware of where we are in the zipper test? Are we opening something or are we closing something? Are we creating a possibility? Or are we creating an order that's reforming what it was that we thought where we were? So it's an orientation and it's an outcome. So look at that. We just made a whole new thing.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much for this. I mean, this is one of the things will stay with me, the concept and the implication. And this also brings us to an interesting segment, which is called Seven Questions to Fame.
Okay.
So whenever you're ready, I'm going to throw seven questions right at your way, and in a rapid fire format, feel
Okay.
free to answer.
I'm ready.
Okay. So when we talk about art thinking movement as of now, what do you think is the biggest impact of people implementing it in their own lives?
I think that it's about them uh, getting to know themselves very quickly in a way that they had not expected. And I think that as we do that, as we think of ourselves as adults, that we're not able to be children, and in children we learn and adapt and integrate things into our lives very quickly. And I think that we're able to do that again by this kind of what we call this improbable process. And I think that anything that you can do that can throw you into something very quickly and open up a closed part of your mind or of your personality, I think is of great value. And the other thing I haven't mentioned is I'm also a snowboarding instructor. And when I see someone get on a snowboard when they're middle aged and they've never done it before, that's a very improbable activity, and it opens up people's mindset about themselves. And because really what you're doing when you're skiing or you're snowboarding or whatever is you are reintroducing yourself to this sort of childish thrill of speed, of movement, of control, of freedom, of locomotion. That is, it's there's really no point to any of it. It's just fun. And I think that that's the kind of thing that it's
Right.
like I have put myself into a situation where I'm doing something unexpected and invigorating. And I think that that invigoration is a critical thing for us to seek out. And because invigorating is energizing. Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. I should be trying
You
snowboarding. I tried ice skating. The next venture should be this.
you'll hate it day one, but you will
Of,
love it day two. Guaranteed.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I've loved snow, so now I think I can love
There
that.
you go.
The second question goes like, since you've lived in different parts of the
Hmm.
world, you explored different countries in Europe, so many states in the US, and you have an understanding of how the Eastern philosophy also works. So when it comes to amalgamating theories within art, which is one theory that speaks the most to you and you feel that is one of the most global art theories that people should know of?
I'm sorry, global art. What is it?
Global art theories or
Theories?
different like some theories, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I would go back again to the one of the sort of most key thinkers for the improbable art workshop is Joseph Beuys. He's a German artist in 60s and 70s, and he was a World War II fighter pilot, and he crashed, and he was rescued by indigenous population in the very remote area, and they essentially they saved his life, but he thought of himself as being born again into a realm of possibility. He then went on and he created this opportunity for himself and for other people. And his philosophy was everybody is an artist, and that art is the practice of everyday life. And I think that his attention to that and focus on that and of distributing that thought was legion. He really advanced it. He created a free he first his classes that he was teaching, he made it open to anybody. There were no barriers. Anybody could come to his class. His classes became so popular and so packed that the university threw him out. So he went on and formed his own university that was, again, free and open to everybody. And I think that just looking at that sort of spirit of enthusiasm and spirit of accommodation is something that everybody can learn from. Whether you're interested in art or not, I just think that Joseph Beuys had an incredibly powerful means of opening up possibilities for people. So I would point to that one.
Yeah, I will definitely go through and read in detail about the concepts that he's talked about. And coming to the next question, what is one concept that you love explaining it to your students and cannot stop talking about it whenever you start talking
Okay,
about it?
so I teach primarily. My teaching is in the social impact core education at NYU's Business School, Stern, and the idea of Stern is that the students are learning to be in the business world, to practice business, which is within our capitalist system is driven primarily by profit and growth. And this is an error, a tremendous error that has been deeply embedded into our notion of business. And what we're trying to do is to have the students realize that business is meant to be an exchange that benefits both sides. We're not trying to extract value. We're not trying to just capitalize on things and profit, but we're actually trying to have an exchange that is beneficial to both. And so the theory that I think really isolates that and focuses on that is called the stakeholder theory. And that is that anyone who's touched by the business, whether it's the manufacturer, the laborer, the customer, or people who are living outside the factory and have to listen to the sound or breathe the air that's polluted by the factory or anything, those are all stakeholders. So there are market stakeholders and non-market stakeholders. People who will never transact with that business or that operation monetarily in any way, shape, or form are still stakeholders for that business. Just as the people who invest their money in it, who work for them, who found these businesses are also stakeholders. And that you cannot operate a business without taking into consideration all of your stakeholders. What is the benefit and the detriment of the business to all of them? Because for good business sense, you have to understand that if you're hurting one particular stakeholder or benefiting another particular stakeholder in excess, that can bring down the whole operation. And that would be, for example, that you are operating an airline, a manufacturing company like Boeing, right? And you're doing all these things to make great airplanes and to keep the price down, and then your airplane blows up, crashes into the ground. Okay? That can end your entire business. And it might have been through all these different business logics that you ended up manufacturing your airplane in this particular way. But what you didn't take into consideration is one particular stakeholder who would be the passenger on that plane that crashes. And that passenger, the one who dies, can be the one that can destroy the entire business. Or it crashes into someone's house and that person dies, and that person's family then sues you and takes everything, from you. So it's like the stakeholder, in a very unexpected way, can bring down the entire operation. The non-market
Got
stakeholder
it.
or the market stakeholder, but that the stakeholder theory is that the number of people that are involved that have a stake in the business goes far beyond those who are monetarily involved in the transactions. And so that we have to think about a much, much broader realm of influence and of impact than those who are just, the person standing behind the counter and the person standing in front of the counter is far from that whole transaction that's taking place.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a thorough space to think of as well, and how we relate or correlate business with the entire segment of different ways of thinking as well. So
We
the
call
next
it
question
business
would
and
be what
society. Business and society. It's like those are huge spheres that overlap in innumerable ways.
and I think that that's how, I mean, that's the core concept of how we sustain as well. I mean, business on like the broader level, it's the business and the society, and both of them coexisting and creating different things to make a better experiential way of doing different things. So I love how you've overlapped both the concepts together.
Yeah, and don't
I mean, I
forget.
wish I could attend one of your lectures at NYU.
Yeah.
Just sit there, witness one of the classes.
So it's not business, it's busyness. So we're busy doing things. And while we're busy doing things, we have to make sure we're not hurting other people along the way because that can make us less busy because we have to stop and, and fix our
And yeah.
mistakes. Yeah.
And so, what would be one book that you would recommend, the title for anyone to read?
Okay. Well, I'm actually right now I'm on a kick of reading this French novelist, Michel Houellebecq, and he's a very popular, very successful contemporary literary author, and I would say he's extremely problematic and extreme. He's very extreme in his expressions and his opinions. But I just read. I'm reading the second book right now called The Elementary Particles, but the first book I read was called The Map and the Territory, and it's about a contemporary artist and his way of navigating the world. And I don't think that it's so common that writers are characterizing the lives of artists. And so I think if you're looking for a way to think about and understand how artists work and live, it's very interesting. But the main thing that's of interest to me is this metaphor that's embodied in the title itself. And so it's the two concepts of the map and the territory. So the map is the representation of things, it's the characterization, it's the description, it's the set of instructions. The territory is the subject matter itself. It's the place. It's the natural world. It's the fundamental occurrence. And the conceit of the artist is that the map is more interesting than the territory, right? So the way that we navigate the world is actually more interesting than the world itself, or it is our way of being and being in the world. And I just think that he brings it through this, tracking this entire artist's career. He's sort of applying that idea for us to think about. Not necessarily that he's right or he's wrong or he needs to be believed, but there are a whole set of writers who write philosophy through literature. And so Houellebecq is one of those. He's giving us a work of philosophy in a novel. And it's much easier to read a novel than it is to read philosophy that can be just as mind expanding. You don't have to struggle with it in the same way that we struggle when we're reading philosophy, because even for somebody who has spent their entire lives reading philosophy, you can have one sentence in philosophy that can stop you dead and make you think about it and work on it and not understand it and struggle with it endlessly. And that literature is there to sort of move you along and move you through it. It can give you just as many expansive ideas as philosophy can, when that's the intent of the author or the ability of the author. And I think that I recommend reading Houellebecq with that in mind, is that he's espousing a kind of philosophical position. He's using his characters like Plato did to expand on particular ideas, and then you can sort of follow this dialogue or this movement between the characters and apply it to yourself. And I think it's any good literature can do it, but there are particular writers who are really focused on doing that, and I think that Houellebecq is one of them. And it's a good read. He tells a good story, and the characters are incredibly interesting and totally bizarre. Yeah.
I mean, it's a combination of I mean, I'd love to give that a read. I love reading on my own, and of having a multidisciplinary thinking approach to different styles and different ways of thinking. So I love how it exposes us to all of it.